Snow in 1975. We had corresponded and spoken on the telephone, but in 1975 she invited me to come up to see her in her 18th century Madison, Connecticut home, the place she had lived since her return from China in 1940. Of course, she showed me the famous corn cribs where Edgar Snow worked and wrote books. And she also fixed a wonderful lunch. Her home is cluttered with artifacts, books, work, things she's collected over the years. And her favorite cat. It took me nearly 3 years to convince her to come back to China in 1978. When Helen Peg Foster first went to China, she was in her early 20s. One of the first people that she met was a young American journalist, Edgar Snow. This is one of the first photographs he ever took of her, the Laughing Buddha in Hangzhou. In 1978, we revisited the site of the Laughing Buddha. Soon, Peg Foster and Edgar Snow were inseparable. The park behind Helen and I in this picture is where Edgar Snow proposed marriage, next to the famous Shanghai Bund. They were married in 1933 and moved to Beijing, then known as Beiping. This is their first house. In a little courtyard, there was a separate building in which Edgar worked and wrote. We found that house in 1978 and filmed there. In about a year, the Snows moved out near Yenjing University, where Ed taught journalism. They were a popular couple, and among their visitors, second from the left next to Helen, is Pearl Buck. This is a photograph taken on the grounds of Yenjing University. Third from the right in the front, third from the left in the front, is Professor Hubert Liang, head of the journalism department. In '78, we revisited Yenjing University. And this is Hubert Liang, who also worked on the magazine Democracy with Helen Snow. These are two of their student friends, Huang Hua and Zhenan Po. Huang Hua, who later became foreign minister of China, was a dear friend and arranged our trip in 1978. Here he is speaking at Yenjing University in December of 1935, at the time of the famous demonstrations. Other student friends like Li Min and Zhang Zhaolin and Lu Cui were also very active in the student demonstrations. You can see Helen has a fur coat here, is marching with the students or near the students. This is Lu Cui making a speech outside the Beijing city wall. Lu Cui was one of those who greeted Helen when we arrived in Beijing, as was Kung Pusheng, another dear friend and a person who was very active in the student marches. This is the famous Tiananmen Gate. We filmed there, and we filmed at the Astrolabe, one of the fragments of the city wall that still exists. In the 1930s, one could look down from the Astrolabe, and where the railroad station is now was the Snow House. This photograph was taken atop the Astrolabe in the 1930s by their friend Théard de Chardin. This is another friend of the Snows who greeted Helen in Xi'an, Vice Premier Wang Zhen, whom she had met in Yan'an in 1937. He gave her this picture. He's on the left, standing, one of the few ever taken on the Long March He's seated here in this photograph taken by Helen in Yan'an. He was fascinated with our filming, and as you can see, quite a sport. This is Wang Li. When Edgar Snow traveled to the Northwest, Huang Hua, the student friend, was the interpreter. Wang Li, here between Edgar Snow and Huang Hua, was a messenger between the Northwest and Beijing. This was the place that Helen left Xi'an to go to Yan'an, and this was the place that she ended, the 8th Route Army headquarters. This is Yan'an in 1978, the famous pagoda in the middle of the picture. This picture was taken in 1937 by Helen, and its history because there is no such wall. And this is one of the few sets of pictures that has the old city wall of Yan'an. You can still see the pagoda in the background. In this photograph, Mao Zedong, Judah, and the other was Agnes Smedley. Judah was a special friend, as he was to all the foreigners. In this photograph, taken outside Mao Zedong's cave, you can see Helen with several other foreigners. This is one of the few pictures that exists with Helen and Mao Zedong in the same picture. We filmed outside that same cave in 1978. From Yan'an, we went on to Bao'an, where Edgar Snow found Mao Zedong at the end of the Long March. The people had been alerted that Helen Snow was coming, and practically the whole town turned out on the streets. It was Helen's first visit to Bao'an. We were told we were the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th foreigners ever to visit Bao'an. You can see the famous picture inside Helen's room that Ed took in 1936 outside Mao's cave. He's wearing Edgar Snow's hat. Usually, Mao's hair was longer and he wore no hat, as in this photograph outside his cave. This is the place where Mao Zedong told his life story to Edgar Snow. We filmed there, and Helen said it was really the high point of her visit to China in 1978. When we returned to Beijing, 2 other old friends were waiting. Deng Yingchao, the widow of Zhou Enlai on the right, and Kang Kejing, the widow of Judah. Both were kind enough to let us film. Deng Yingchao had to leave early, as you can see. Kang Kejing, whom Helen had met in Yan'an in 1937, gave a lovely banquet for Helen in 1978. Lately, Helen Snow has been working with Loring Mandel, who will write the 8-hour miniseries about hers and Ed's experiences in the 1930s in China. As ever, she can be found in her Madison, Connecticut home and is available to those of us who need information about China.